Hello, hello, hello. Hello, you all. Hello, hello. I am completely and utterly late for the show. But it's okay. It's okay. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You all see the moniker. You all see the thumbnail, right? The more I listen to these interviews regarding Nolan Wells, the less interested I am in trying to sound or trying to prove that these young men killed Nolan. I don't know that they did. And after looking at everything that has come out publicly, right? I think it's entirely possible that these young men did not kill Nolan. What I cannot get past is the possibility that some of the people involved know considerably more about what happened to Nolan than they have publicly acknowledged, because the confidence coming from these young men and especially their attorneys does not sound like the uncertainty you have or you would expect in a case where everybody supposedly still wants to know what happened. That is what I want to talk about today, because something about this case has bothered me from the beginning. The public story seemed to move toward accidental drowning and no foul play very early in this discussion, before the public had answers to some of the most basic questions about Nolan's final hours. Now we have a defense attorney out here speaking with extraordinary certainty about their evidence and their clients. And at one point, an attorney actually says, "We know what happened." When I put those two things together, I have to ask whether these attorneys know that this investigation is heading toward the same conclusion that seemed to be formed or being put together almost from day one. I'm not telling you that somebody fixed this case. I can't prove that. I am telling you why I'm suspicious of why this has unfolded the way that it has unfolded, and why I think the public has been asked to accept too many important pieces of this story based primarily on what these kids said. The bilge pump failed because they said it failed. Nolan decided to stay behind because they said he decided to stay behind. Another boat assisted them because that is the explanation we have been told by these kids. Later, witnesses supposedly saw Nolan alive because the defense says those witnesses exist. Warren says Christine was told they had Nolan's phone. Yet Christine describes having to use Life 360 while trying to locate her son and discovering that his phone was already on land. Maybe every one of these explanations is true. I'm not dismissing them simply because they come from the defense. My problem is that Nolan Wells is dead. His mother still doesn't know what happened to him. And the people who sound most certain about this case are the lawyers representing those young men who have been under public scrutiny. That is why I want to go back to the beginning and look at how we got here. How did we get here? Please hit the like and subscribe. Also, make sure you turn on all notifications. How did this become a drowning story so quickly? When Nolan disappeared from Horn Island, investigators initially had a fairly straightforward but serious situation. An 18-year-old had gone to an island with friends. The friends eventually returned, and Nolan didn't return with them. Before anybody could responsibly explain what happened to that boy, investigators needed to establish when he was last seen, who saw him, who was with him, and what happened before the boats left, and what happened during the period when nobody could account for Nolan. Instead, very early in the case, the public was already hearing language pointing towards drowning and no apparent foul play. That bothered me from the beginning, because being surrounded by water can explain where somebody might drown, but it cannot by itself explain how that person ended up in the water or what happened immediately beforehand. Play this clip.
Processing this tragic event and all of Nolan's close friends. And we're still waiting for 100% confirmation. I'll assure you that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, we're looking at this whole case just like we would any other case. And we're going to be as thorough as we can.
Now, Sheriff Ledbetter tells me that even with the autopsy scheduled for tomorrow, he doesn't believe that there were any signs of foul play. But again, this is a very active investigation, and as answered...
A very active investigation. This is where my first question begins. What evidence existed that early in the investigation? What evidence existed that early that justified becoming comfortable, that sheriff became comfortable with a drowning explanation? What evidence was there? I'm not saying drowning should not have been considered. Obviously, it should have been considered. I'm asking why it appeared to become such a prominent explanation before some of the basic questions surrounding Nolan's movements had been publicly answered. The boat's Garmin data gives us something objective. The reported GPS analysis shows that the boat carrying Nolan to Horn Island arrived at approximately 11:14 that morning, remained near the west tip, and departed at approximately 4:31. Early public reporting placed Nolan's last sighting around 3 p.m. That leaves a period before the boat departed that needed to be accounted for. And GPS cannot tell us what Nolan was doing during that period. GPS can tell us where the boat was. It cannot tell us who Nolan was talking to, where he walked, who was standing beside him, or what happened to him. The defense now says there are witnesses who placed Nolan alive later on. If those witnesses can independently establish that Nolan was alive after these young men departed, that's extremely important evidence, and I would have no problem saying that it substantiates or substantially helps their defense. What I want to know is who those witnesses are, how the time was established, when they came forward, and what corroborates their accounts. Those are reasonable questions because a later independent verified sighting could dramatically change the timeline. There's another problem with the argument that Horn Island was simply too crowded for something to happen unnoticed. We have repeatedly been told there were large numbers of people on that island, and the defense itself uses the crowd as part of its argument that these young men could not have done something terrible to Nolan without somebody seeing it. I understand that argument, but it creates an obvious question in the other direction. If there were too many people around for something nefarious to happen, somebody to do something nefarious to Nolan, then there should have been too many people around for some people not to notice something innocent happening, like Nolan drowning. If it was that many people on that island, regardless of what happened, somebody should have seen something. If there were too many people around, where are the people who can tell us what actually happened to Nolan? And I'm not saying nobody saw Nolan after his friends say they left him. The defense claims later witnesses did. What I am saying is that if this island was packed with people, somebody should be able to help fill in this timeline after 4/31. Who saw Nolan? Who spoke to Nolan? Was he alone? Was he with somebody? Did anybody see him go into the water? Did anybody see him swim? Did anybody see him in distress? If he remained on the island after his friends left, somebody presumably had an opportunity to see what happened next. That is why I cannot accept there were too many people around for anything to happen to Nolan. Nothing could have happened to Nolan. As the end of the discussion, that can't be all that happened. If the crowd is evidence when it helps the defense, then the crowd should also be a potential source of witnesses who can tell us what happened to Nolan. The same problem appears when I look at Nolan's phone. Because once again, we have accounts that may ultimately have an innocent explanation, but the public sequence still leaves a very basic question unanswered. Please hit the like and subscribe button, please and thank you. Christina's description of the night Nolan disappeared is important because it tells us what she understood at the time, not what everybody reconstructed later on after the interviews, the lawyers, and the public scrutiny entered the picture. What she knew the night of Nolan's disappearance. According to Christine, Warren called and asked whether she had seen or spoken to Nolan. Christine says she had not because she believed Nolan was still with the people he had gone out with. Listen to her describe that call.
I saw his friend's name and my heart just dropped.
Which friend was it?
So this was Warren that called. That
Warren called.
Which, and he did say, hey, Miss Christine, I guess trying to calm the parent in me, but, you can't calm that. You tell me my child is missing.
Do you remember his words? What did he say?
He said, hey, Miss Christine, have you seen Nolan or talked to Nolan? I said, no, I thought he was with you guys, He's like, no, nobody's talked to him. We left the island at, I think he said 3 p.m. and he wanted to stay because he was talking to a girl named Katie. And so then it turned into, Katie is also missing. No one can find her. And the explanation of no one knows this Katie, like we've never met her type of deal.
That conversation raises a question by itself. Warren is asking Nolan's mother whether she's heard from Nolan. But we later learned that Nolan's phone had returned from Horn Island without him. If the group already knew they had Nolan's phone, then the fact that the phone was separated from Nolan should have been one of the most important pieces of information in that conversation. Now listen to what Christine says she did afterwards.
But we are grateful, especially to our friend Tashima, who actually was one of the people who helped us that night. She went and picked up his cell phone from where it was, and then provided that to us because we of course contacted authorities to figure out who to do the report with, whether it was the county or the city, which then turned into DMR, who I contacted immediately from there. And, but so So our friend actually, when I called her, Nolan is best friends with her two sons, Jalen and Javon. When I called her, I said, Tashima, have you seen Nolan? He's missing. No one has seen him. No one has talked to him. The boys were actually with her sons. So they opened up their Snapchat because a lot of the kids do have their locations where they're tracking one another. So one of the boys says, well, it's showing that I can't exactly remember what his location was showing, but my Life 360 location was showing something completely different. It was actually showing that his phone was like he was on land. And so we ended up, she received the phone from that parent, and then we met up where his car was, which was at a separate location. There were issues.
So this is the part I cannot get past. Christine is trying to locate her son. Her friend's sons are checking Snapchat. Christina checks Life 360 and she discovers that Nolan's phone is showing on land. Her friend then goes to retrieve that phone. Warren later goes on Officer Tatum's show and gives his own account of what happened with that phone.
Family, and my buddy went out to his truck and handed the phone over. No complications, no issue, nothing. But I mean, I told Miss Christine that we had his phone and he had left it in our possession on the boat.
When did you, Miss Christine is Nolan's mom?
Correct.
When did you?
Warren said he told Christine that they had Nolan's phone. I'm not going to call Warren a liar based on the difference because there are ways these accounts could fit together. Christina could have been told they had the phone and then checked Life 360 to determine exactly where it was. There could have been confusion during a frightening and chaotic conversation. People's recollections of a stressful night can also differ. What I want is the sequence, because the sequence is important. If Warren told Christina during the first call that they had Nolan's phone, why does Christine's description sound like she was actively trying to locate Nolan and discover through Life 360 that his phone was already on land? Why did she need to ping the phone to determine where it was? When exactly did Christina learn that her son's phone had returned from Horn Island without her son? There's another practical question here. If Warren knew Nolan's phone was in the group, asking Christina whether she had heard from Nolan becomes more complicated because Nolan did not have his phone. He certainly could have borrowed somebody else's phone, and I'm not pretending that his own phone was the only way he could communicate. My point is that knowing Nolan's phone had returned without Nolan would have been extremely relevant information when calling his mother to ask whether she had heard from him. This is exactly what I mean when I say too much of this case still depends upon accepting those boys' account of what happened. Warren says Christina was told. Christina's description leaves me wondering when she was told. That is something that should be easy to establish through phone records, interviews, and the people involved. I do not need a conspiracy theory to ask that question. I just need a clear timeline. The next part of the case presents the same problem, and that is the alleged bilge pump failure. Notice I said the alleged bilge pump failure. Please hit the subscribe and the like button, please. I have changed the way I talk about the bilge pump because I want to be accurate. I previously treated the bilge pump failure almost like an established mechanical fact. Based on the public material we have reviewed, what I can actually establish is that somebody called CETO and reported that the bilge pump had stopped working and that the boat was taking on water. Those are not exactly the same thing. Let me say it again. These are not the same thing. That's the contradiction. Listen to the call.
Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our village pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles? Hello?
Hey,
Yes, how far is the water coming up, sir?
it's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. Like we're going down.
All right, well, let's get you going. Membership number or phone number listed on the account, sir.
The caller says the bilge pump stopped working and describes the boat as sinking. I'm not saying he was lying. I wasn't there, and the public material we have reviewed does not allow me to establish that the pump was working normally neither, one way or the other. My point is much narrower. The recording proves what the caller reported. The recording itself does not mechanically diagnose the boat. That distinction matters because this alleged mechanical problem becomes part of the explanation for why the group needed to leave Horn Island when it did. If investigators inspected the bilge pump and documented the failure, that would answer part of my question. If the person who assisted them saw the flooding and can independently describe the condition of the boat, that would prove corroboration. If repairs were subsequently made and documented, that would matter too. Then we have another interesting portion of the CETO call. After describing the boat as sinking, the caller specifically asks whether they need the U.S. States Coast Guard. Play the clip. Wait a minute, hold on.
All right, and is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's
How many? All right, do you need the United States Coast Guard?
What?
Do you need the United States Coast Guard?
No, we do not need that.
All right. All right, do you have your current GPS coordinates?
My question is, why don't they need that? If he's sinking and we're going down, and we're sinking, you would want anybody that's available to come get you. Wouldn't you want anybody that was able to get there quickly to come get you if you were sinking? He declines the Coast Guard. That does not mean the emergency was fake. A young person could initially panic, realize the situation was manageable, and decide the Coast Guard was unnecessary. Nearby boaters could also have begun helping while this was happening, right? There are ordinary explanations for this decision, and those explanations should be considered. The CETO recording then gives us another important a piece of information, because the captain says he just spoke to Grandpa, apparently on the other boat, and was told that assistance was no longer needed. Let me play that clip.
Hung up with him. He said that they don't need any help right now, but if something changes, they'll call me back. So I'm guessing that they may have figured it out, because that's what he said. So they're in a panic and their boat won't crank.
Yeah, they're in a panic. He's saying the bilge is not keeping up. I asked for Coast Guard. He said no, but he's just really upset on the back end. And, you know, I get it. It's a kid. He just doesn't understand.
Okay.
According to the recording, the CETO's subsequent account, the owner canceled because other assistance had been obtained. That may be exactly what happened, but once again, I want the independent piece of the story. Who provided the assistance? Who helped them? Who is the person that arrived and helped them? Okay. Who provided that assistance? What condition did that person find the boat in? And what exactly did that person do to help them? The GPS information also matters here. The Garmin analysis reportedly shows the boat departing Horn Island around 4:31, traveling very slowly for approximately 2.75 miles until roughly 5:24 p.m., and then returning to normal speeds of roughly 30 to 35 knots. That movement is consistent with the account that the boat was being assisted with or towed during the problem. It is important evidence supporting that explanation, but GPS by itself does not tell us why the boat was moving slowly for a whole hour or diagnose the bilge system. This is why I keep coming back to the same standard. I'm not rejecting these kids' account of what happened because it came from them. I'm asking who independently verified each important part of what these kids said. They said the bilge failed. Can somebody independently verify that it did? We're taking their word for what happened that day. We're taking every piece of their description. We're taking everything that they say as gospel. Okay? There's a big difference between saying their explanation is impossible, and saying their explanation still needs corroboration. I'm saying the second one. It still needs corroboration. Then the young men themselves addressed the suspicion surrounding Cito on Officer Tatum's show, and this is where I think the interview begins answering a question that I'm not actually asking. Play the clip.
So what do you guys think about that audio?
Well, I can go ahead and say that as you posted that clip of all of us on the boat, you know, as it's rolling, not rolling, but right there sitting in the water, Wyatt's on the phone with Cito in that clip. I mean, he's on the phone. Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something, or scrambling around, or everybody in a small space on the boat looking at him or something? I mean, it's just so crazy to think that. Why would we call Cito if we have a dead body on the boat? I mean, why would we call the Coast Guard? You know, why would we do the things we did if we know we killed somebody? And then another following up on that is, why aren't we in jail yet? I mean, we're not geniuses.
Yeah, I would have this. The single most question that I would have would be, who took the picture of y'all? Who's on the other boat? Somebody's very, very close to you all. Nolan could have been on that boat. While they were taking a picture of you, you 7, Nolan could have been on the boat behind them. So that doesn't prove anything. You saying that why would we call the Coast Guard? Why would we call Cito if Nolan was on our boat? No, Nolan was on the boat where the camera was. That could have been it. Their argument is essentially that calling Cito would make no sense if Nolan were dead on their boat. I understand the logic, but that does not answer my question, because I am not alleging that Nolan's dead body was sitting on their boat while somebody called Cito. That's not what I'm saying. I want to know what happened to Nolan during the part of the timeline that remains unclear, and whether the explanations surrounding that period have been independently verified. Those are different questions. One of the young men also says, why ain't they in jail yet? Why we ain't smart? We should be in jail. His argument appears to be that if there were evidence proving these accusations, law enforcement would have already arrested him. That may simply be the confidence of somebody who knows he did not commit a crime. However, when I combine the confidence of these young men with the confidence of their lawyers, I start wondering whether their certainty comes from something more concrete. Maybe they have been shown evidence that the public has not seen. Maybe their lawyers have witnesses who established a later timeline. Maybe they have information that makes them certain they will not be charged with murder. I don't know. But by the time we get to the lawyer, their language makes that question impossible for me to ignore. please hit the like and the subscribe button. Please and thank you. What do these lawyers know that Nolan's mother don't know, that Christina don't know? What do they know? This is the part that changed my thinking about this case. I started out concentrating primarily on whether these young men themselves could have been responsible for Nolan's death. After listening to these interviews, I think there is another question that may be more important right now. What do these young men and their lawyers know about what actually happened to Nolan? One of Nolan's friends is directly asked what he thinks happened, when his answer contains uncertainty. He says that he and his friends have discussed it, that they have wondered what happened, and that he wants to know just like everybody else. That's what one of Nolan's friends says. Listen to the clip.
Morgan, Warren, and Jax left the island at about 4:30 p.m. That's it. They were gone. That is not open for debate. So that's...
Let me play this one. Hold on.
It's just kind of concerned me with like how people have the time of day to just make up complete lies out of something that they have no evidence of and to post on social media to put other people down. It's insane to me, like how like just people push this and, you know, want to make this a story that it's absolutely not. I don't know what happened to Nolan. My friends don't know what happened to Nolan. But for people to come around and say, oh, this happened for a fact, and I know this, and there's no telling me otherwise, then that's just stupid. You have no, like, half these people that are saying all these crazy things on the internet, those lies have already been debunked. There's evidence supporting this is a lie. Like, why are you still saying this? These people just have no idea what they're talking about, and it's very clear because a lot of these people just speak without thinking and post stuff without thinking. But at the end of the day, it just looks really stupid on their page and whatever they're posting on. But it's just sad. Like, people really take the time out of their day to post a bunch of BS lies on a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds who have never done anything to hurt anyone and, loved their friend. Like, I love that man more than anybody. And like, so did all my friends. And it's absolutely horrible that these people want to come on and push this narrative that we had something to do with this or we killed our best friend. It's just sick to me, Brandon.
I actually find that response understandable if his account is true. If you left your friend alive and later learned that he was dead, you could genuinely have no idea what happened after you left. There's nothing inherently suspicious about saying you don't know. That lawyer, however, is very different.
Tyler Cox really likes evidence. I really like evidence. Morgan, Jax, Warren, we really like evidence. And that's the difference between the other guys and us.
Hold on.
We really like evidence here.
Okay.
Tyler Cox, Morgan, Jax, Warren, we really like evidence. And that's the difference between the other guys and us. And we have evidence. We have the receipts, we have the goods, and we're going to be presenting it in court. And I will say, once we present it in court, we're going to say, now you can't leave.
Do you think that the other side, because I've seen...
Well, we don't need to listen to that. But we heard all we need to hear. That attorney says he has evidence. He has the goods. He has the facts. He refers to receipts and talks about having all the goods. And then he makes the statement that interests me more than almost anything else in these interviews. We know what happened. Let me play this clip.
Fact. They were gone. And at that time, Nolan Wells was still alive. Now, I'm not going to name them out of respect for their privacy, But just as one example, there are two very fine, upstanding members of the Ocean Springs community who saw Nolan Wells at about 10 minutes to 6 p.m. So about an hour and a half after these fine young men had left the island, they were gone, departed, Nolan Wells was alive. And these two witnesses, two very reliable, very credible, and very upstanding members of the community, they saw Nolan. And they've known Nolan for years. There's no chance that they made a mistake. And by the way, this can be corroborated through other evidence, other eyewitness accounts. And that's the end of it right there. That's before we get into everything else about the situation.
We know what happened. That is a remarkably strong statement. I have the goods. We have the goods. That's a very strong statement for a defense attorney to make, because it goes beyond simply saying that he believes his clients are innocent. It naturally raises the question of what exactly he believes he knows. Does he have evidence establishing how Nolan died? Does he know who Nolan was with after these young men say they left? Does he have independently verified witnesses who placed Nolan alive at a later time? Does he have video, phone records, location data, or forensic evidence that the public has not seen? Does he simply mean that he knows enough about the timeline to establish that his clients could not have been responsible? Any of those explanations could account for this confidence, this solid and deliberate confidence. But I want to know which one it is. I want to know which one it is. Any of those explanations could account for his confidence, but I want to know what he thinks he knows or wants to. I want to know which one it is. The difference between the client's language and that lawyer's language is what catches my attention. One young man essentially says that he and his friends still wonder what happened to Nolan, while the attorney says that they have evidence and know what happened. Those statements do not necessarily contradict each other, because an attorney could possess information his client did not personally witness. The attorney could also be using "we know what happened" in the narrow sense of knowing what happened during the portion of the timeline relevant to his clients. However, that still means the lawyer believes he possesses information that resolves something important about this case. That is where the attorney's confidence connects directly back to the beginning for me. Very early, this case appeared publicly to be moving toward drowning and no foul play, according to Sheriff Ledbetter. Now, while Nolan's mama is still asking what happened to her son, the defense attorney, the defense lawyer, sounds extraordinarily confident that he has evidence explaining what happened and clearing his clients. I cannot prove those two things are connected, but I would be foolish not to notice those. This is why I keep asking whether the investigation reached its conclusion after following all the evidence, or whether a conclusion formed early and subsequently evidence has been interpreted within that framework of mind. If you tell me that he drowned at the beginning a week ago, most people are going to look for the evidence that that person drowned. Those knowing the evidence, following the evidence, and coming to and knowing a conclusion and then finding the evidence, those are two different paths. Those are two very different investigative paths. And the only thing that ultimately resolves that question is the evidence. There's also the matter of all the people supposedly present on Horn Island that day. The defense uses the size of the crowd as part of the argument for why these young men could not have done something to Nolan without being seen. That is a legitimate argument, but the same damn crowd should also make it possible to reconstruct that fucking timeline. More of Nolan's movements should have been seen. If hundreds of people were around, somebody may have seen him after those young men say they left him. Somebody may have spoken to him, seen who he was with, watched where he went, or observed him near the water. The defense says later witnesses exist. If those witnesses establish Nolan was alive at 5:50 or some other later time, then authenticate those accounts and put them into the timeline. That would be important evidence, right? That would shut all of this shit down about these kids, wouldn't it? If they have somebody who saw Nolan at 5:50, like he said, that would shut down all this conversation. That would shut down all of this goofiness that's going on the internet. Why haven't they presented that? Why haven't they presented that timeline, that evidence that somebody else saw Nolan? What I cannot accept is using that crowd in only one direction. That crowd is for y'all defense. It's too many people here. We couldn't have did something in front of all these people. So you're using that crowd to defend yourself. Why isn't the police using that crowd to defend Nolan? You cannot say there were too many people around for these young men to harm Nolan unnoticed and then simultaneously act as though it is unreasonable to ask why that same enormous crowd has not produced a clear public account of what happened to Nolan. That is the hole at the center of this case. That is the whole hole at the center of this case. Everybody seems to have an explanation for why their particular piece isn't suspicious. But Nolan's mother still doesn't have the complete explanation of what happened to her child. And somehow that lawyer does. After going through these interviews, I am actually less certain that these young men personally caused Nolan's death than I was when I first began following this case. I'm willing to say that plainly because I'm interested in what the evidence shows, not enforcing the evidence to support a theory I already have. However, I have become more suspicious about something else. I think it's entirely reasonable to ask whether people in this circle know considerably more about Nolan's final hours than the public has been told. And I especially want to know what information gives these defense attorneys such extraordinary confidence. From the beginning, the public narrative seemed to be moving toward an accidental drowning with no foul play. Now, the attorneys representing the young men who have been under public suspicion are speaking as though they possess evidence that settles this matter. That does not prove the outcome was predetermined. But it explains why I keep wondering whether these attorneys already know what the investigation is going to end up in the same place. The narrative appeared to be heading from the very beginning, an accidental drowning. Too many important parts of the story still depend upon accepting the account of these young boys. It all hinges on what they told us. What they told us. Without seeing all the evidence behind that. We have a recorded call establishing that a bilge pump failure was reported, not that a bilge pump failure actually happened. But I still want to know what physical or independent evidence verified this mechanical problem. We have an account that another boat assisted them, and I want to hear what the people providing that assistance actually observed. We have Warren saying that Christina was told they had Nolan's phone, while Christina describes using Life 360 during her effort to locate her son and discovering that his phone was already on land. If Warren told her he had the phone, why would she need to be pinging it and doing all this, that, and the third? Why wouldn't she have just called Warren back and said, hey, Warren, bring me the phone? Why wouldn't she have just said that if she knew Warren and them had the phone? Warren said he told her, so why didn't she know he had it? Those accounts may have a complete, reasonable explanation, but the timeline should establish what the explanation is. We also have the argument that Horn Island was packed with people, and therefore it would have been extremely difficult for these young men to do something to Nolan without somebody seeing it. I'm willing to consider that argument. But then I also want to know what all those potential witnesses saw after these young men say they left. If later witnesses can establish that Nolan was alive after the group departed, that evidence needs to become part of the factual timeline rather than simply another assertion from the defense. I don't want to fucking hear that from the defense. I want to hear this independent corroboration from those two witnesses who were the ones who saw Nolan at 550. Don't have no defense. Don't have the defense come out here talking about, we got people who say we saw him at 550. No. I need that fucking Sheriff Ledbetter to come out here and say, well, we have witnesses that blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. None of these questions require me to accuse these young men of murder. And I am not doing that. It is entirely possible that they did not cause Nolan's death. It's also equally possible that they did. But what I can't get past is the sea-toll call, that noise in the background of that sea-toll call. It's also possible that these young men know something about what happened afterward, know who Nolan was with, or know information that explains why their attorneys are so extraordinarily certain that they will be cleared. There's also the possibility that the attorneys themselves possess evidence that their clients do not personally know about. Until that evidence becomes public or is tested in the court, I cannot tell you which explanation is correct. What I can tell you is why the attorney's statement bothers me. He does not merely express confidence in his clients. He talks about possessing evidence and receipts and then says, we know what happened. When an attorney representing people at the center of this much public suspicion says that, I'm going to take his words seriously and ask what he means by that. Nolan's mother has spent the entire ordeal trying to answer that very exact question. Have you told Nolan's mom what you know? Lawyer, Mr. Smarty Pants lawyer, did you tell Nolan's mom what happened? You said, we know what happened. So if you know what happened, have you told his mama what happened? What have you told his mama? Have you told his mama anything? Does she know what happened to her son? She has to determine where her son was. She wants to know what happened to her son. She has had to question that timeline that y'all gave. She has had to push for answers about what happened after her son was last seen. Meanwhile, the fucking defense attorney is publicly telling us that he knows what the fuck happened. You telling us what happened. You said you know the goods. You got the goods. You got the receipts. Did you tell his mama what happened to him? That boy. Did you tell him his mama what happened to her boy? That is the contradiction at the center of my concern. The family is still looking for the fucking answers while the defense attorney speaks as though he already has the fucking answers. If he got the fucking answers, give it to his mama. Otherwise, shut your ass up lying on TV. That is also what I meant when I say the fix is in. I'm not claiming that I have proven a conspiracy or that the law enforcement deliberately covered up Nolan's death. My concern is that the accidental drowning / no foul play explanation appeared very early, and everything that has happened since makes me question whether that conclusion was reached after all the evidence was examined or whether people became committed to that conclusion before some of the most important questions were answered. They still have not given us an explanation as to why that second person who did the autopsy never received his throat. never received Nolan's lungs. If the evidence ultimately proves that Nolan accidentally drowned and nobody else was responsible, then that should be the conclusion of this case. I have no problem accepting that result if the evidence establishes that. What I will not do is accept that conclusion simply because it was repeated early and often. The evidence should determine the outcome. The outcome should never determine how we interpret that evidence. And that is why the attorney's statement is so important to me. When he says that they have the evidence and we know what happened, I do not need to accuse him of anything. I only need to take him at his word and ask the question Nolan's mother deserves to have answered. What happened to her son? Mr. Defense Attorney, if you know what happened to Nolan, then tell his mother what happened. And this can end all of this. All of this. Y'all, please hit the like and the subscribe button. Please and thank you. Let me read some of the comments. Welcome, please hit the like button. Okay. Good morning. TCW 4731. This is some shit. Yes, it is some shit. Okay. Yes, it is some shit. Okay. Boy, thank you. I have a hot what's in the hood. Wow. Okay. Come on, girl. Let me. Boy, y'all wild. Come on, bitch. Just answer. Yeah. Okay. Guilty as what? How guilty are they? We don't know. We don't know how guilty they are. What's done in the dark always will come to the light. Let's hope that's the case. We never know. We should see what's going on. We don't know what's going on, but we want to see. We want to see what happened. Everybody's invested in what happened. Those defense attorneys came on and said, he knows what happened. Okay, if he knows what happened, then he should be telling the mama. He should be telling Christine what happened. 100% it wasn't those boys that racist wokes were blaming. He either drowned or something else happened on that island, but not those boys. It's not obvious as hell. Nothing is obvious. Nothing is obvious. I personally, I believe they know what happened to Nolan. Whether they did it or not, they know what happened to Nolan. He said, no more leads will emerge because nobody in their right mind would come forward now after seeing the disgusting behavior of the justice for Nolan woke mob. Why y'all keep saying woke mob? Half of y'all don't even know what woke means. Stop using words y'all don't even know what they mean. You're just using keywords. Some of y'all just goofy like that. Nobody knows what happened, but they have an idea. They have an idea. That lawyer has an idea. That lawyer has an idea of what happened. That's the whole point. The whole point is to tell Christina what happened to her son, and let's have this done. And my whole thing is this. If he would have drowned, why didn't they just come out and say he drowned? Why didn't they say that? If he drowned and it was so innocent, it was just a drowning, why didn't they just say that? They could have just said that. They could have presented all the proof in the world. They could have presented all the proof and we could have been like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. They could have did that. Why didn't they do that, though? Why didn't they just come out and say he drowned? Why didn't they present the proof? They had the throat, they had the lungs, they had everything. Why didn't they just come out and say, hey, we went through toxicology, we went through everything, blah, 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 and he was drunk and he fell into the water and he drowned. Simple explanation, and then boom, 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 we would have all went back to whatever. But that's not what happened. Because they would have came out and said that. It would have ended all of this. But that's not what happened. And I got a feeling that those young boys know what happened. They may not have done it, but they know what happened. And we await what they say. The problem is, now the public is not going to believe half of what you say because you sealed the autopsy records. You sealed the autopsy records. And that's half the problem. You locked us in to us believing that you're trying to hide something when you should have been upfront and transparent. Maybe y'all have a suspect. Maybe y'all narrowing in on the suspect. Maybe there ain't no suspect. Nobody knows. I personally believe they didn't do anything, but they know who and what happened to Nolan. And that lawyer is so confident, I'm pretty sure he knows what else happened. But don't come with the bullshit, because we're not going to go for just any old bullshit. Okay? And I'll leave it there. Y'all see me posting videos. Please hit the like and the subscribe button. Turn on the notifications, because it's kind of difficult for me to keep doing lives all the time. But I'm going to try to do lives every once in a while. But I'm going to present, videos, throughout the day. We don't know whether he was drunk and drowned. We don't know any of those things. We cannot say that. We cannot say definitively that he was. We cannot say definitively that he wasn't. We don't know. Okay? I'm not willing to say any of that. If he was drunk and he drowned, then why didn't they say that? Why nobody came forward and say that? That would have been a reasonable explanation. Somebody saw him and he fell into the water and we tried. Yeah, CNN. How does CNN know? That's the question. How does CNN know? CNN said this weeks ago. They hadn't even came back with his report, with his toxicology or the autopsy. So how can they say he got drunk and drowned? They can't. So you don't believe everything they say, right? I don't know what happened. I hope for his family's sake that they find. Yes, I hope they find the answers very soon. How he died, when he died, whether somebody helped him die, whether somebody didn't help him die. Either way it go, we need to know, because everybody's invested in this whole thing. Yeah, maybe he did have beer. Maybe he did. Nobody's saying that he didn't get drunk and drown. Nobody said that. Nobody said he didn't. Nobody said he did. My question is, if the lawyer knows, if that defense attorney knows, then why hasn't he told Christina, the mama? This is what I'm going to share with you. I am the defense attorney, but I'm going to share this with you, blah, 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 blah. But either way it go, it's still going to be a mystery. Either way it go. But please hit the like and the subscribe button. I appreciate it. I like to do these kind of breakdowns of this kind of case, because I don't like to comment every day. I like to think about these explanations and whatnot. And one conclusion, I'll leave you with this. Everything that we have been told has been told to us by those young men. What makes us think we can believe these young men? They said they had mechanical failure, a bilge problem. That's because they said it. We don't have any corroborating evidence to say they had a bilge problem. They said that. They said they never saw Nolan after 4:30. They said that. They said all of our evidence, all of this is based on what they said. That's all I'm saying. It's weird for the kids to have said, we don't need the Coast Guard. We don't need nobody coming to get us. We don't need nobody. Why would you call Cito if you didn't need nobody? Why would you do that? I'm just saying. These are questions that I have, still have, and will continue to have until they get a complete explanation. And what I'm saying is that defense attorney seems to be very confident and very cocky. So I will see you in the next video, guys. Please and thank you, and I appreciate you guys for listening to my take.